Tony, I look forward to our conversation every single year with great excitement. It's a pleasure to once again speak to the man who's played a huge part in my passion for the draft, and I'm sure countless others as well. And my first question is about something that you've tweeted recently. It's
Mhm.
that a team might be about to trade up to number 3 with the Arizona Cardinals. What is the thinking here? What are you hearing?
Well, there are a lot of teams that want to trade up to number three, and more than that, the Arizona Cardinals want to trade down from number three. What I tweeted yesterday is there's a team that's looking to move up for one of the offensive linemen, and that offensive lineman is Paris Johnson. And as I explained in an article that I just turned into Pro Football Network, a lot of people lost their minds over that tweet, thinking it's a lie, it's a lie, it's a lie. The left tackle position is something that's always been coveted in the draft by teams. You got to have that big athletic left tackle. And, that's still the case. You look at this year's draft, there were basically two top rated left tackles: Paris Johnson of Ohio State, who has separated himself from the rest of the class, and Broderick Jones. So if you want a left tackle, you better make sure you get it early. So it's really not that crazy thinking. And especially as I'm concerned, Paris Johnson is the seventh rated player on my board. So to go from 7 to 3 is not a huge jump. As you hear my cell phone go off, which I apologize. That means somebody really wants to get in touch with me. We can wait. We can wait
I
for
just
that.
love that your cell phone is a bit of Led Zeppelin there, Tony. It
Maybe
couldn't
we're
be
still
anything else. Awesome. Well, listen, I just wonder. My follow up to this then is: do you think that if a team does trade up for Paris Johnson, are we going to see an earlier run on offensive linemen than perhaps a lot of people have been projecting? They've kind of been saying, the back end of the top 10 and then a rush. Do you think that kind of bumps up a little bit if Johnson goes number 3?
I mean, I always had all the offensive linemen off the board by pick 11 anyway. I thought when you look at Chicago at 9, you look at the Eagles at 10, you look at Tennessee at 11, I think that's where they're going to go anyway. I know the New York Jets would love for an offensive lineman to fall into the laps at 13, but, I don't think that's going to happen.
We're hearing all sorts at the moment. There's a lot of information going out there, and the national media. It seems like there's something else every single day at the moment. The Texans, I just wonder if they're having a little bit of fun here, Tony, because it seems like
Yeah.
every single day there's something else being
Yeah.
mocked to number 2. What do you think is going to happen with the Texans at number 2, and how important is that pick going to be for the rest of this draft, do you think?
It's amazing because, we really don't know, right? Bryce Young is going to go to Carolina. And I've been making calls. And again, as I said in this article, I've heard everything from the quarterbacks are going to go 1, 2, 3, 4 to the quarterbacks will go 1. And then the next quarterback will be taken with the 4th pick, the Indianapolis Colts. What happens at 2? I mean, I was told by somebody, the same person who told me last year at this time that Derek Stingley was going to be taken by the Houston Texans with the 3rd pick. And I had that story before anybody else, that they're not going to take CJ Stroud. And if they take anybody else, if they take any player, it's going to obviously they're going to take a player. If they can't trade down, they take a player too. It's going to be Will Anderson of Alabama. Now, Nick Caserio, there's been talk about his future with the Houston Texans. They got to get that quarterback position right. I think what Houston would really like to do is trade down, get a boatload of capital. Obviously, they're not confident in any of the quarterbacks in this year's draft. That is understandable. And then build a team with that extra draft capital, and then maybe wait to 2024 where it looks like it's going to be a quarterback-rich class, not just the top 2 guys, Williams and May, but a lot of other good quarterbacks. There's a lot of risk in that. Obviously, if you want the top 2 quarterbacks, you're going to have to stink another year and get one of the top 2 picks another year. But there's a lot of risk in that. But I think that's what they prefer to do: trade down, get the draft capital, and then build the team from there.
What's your personal view on CJ Stroud? It seems like quite a strange time for him at the moment. We'd all assumed, I think most people had, that he was going to go in the top 2,
Yeah.
Tony. But if the Texans aren't taking him and if the Panthers aren't taking him, now people are saying, where is he going to go? And it's quite hard to pair him. But, what's your view on Stroud? And have you got a sort of a feeling on where he may eventually land?
My feeling on Stroud has been consistent all along, and as someone has a daughter who goes to Ohio State, and whenever the Ohio State Buckeyes are playing, the TV's on always in this house with the Ohio State Buckeyes. It's always been consistent. Is I like his upside, but I don't know which CJ Stroud we're going to get. Are we going to get the CJ Stroud that we saw slice and dice the Georgia defense in the semifinal game? Or are we going to get the CJ Stroud who destroyed and annihilated a very good Utah defense in the 2022 Rose Bowl? Or are we going to get the CJ Stroud who couldn't get the ball in the end zone against Michigan, got thumped by the Wolverines 2 years in a row, started slow against Iowa, and even though they beat Iowa by like 40 points, if you look, the score at halftime was like 12-3 or something like that. Struggled against Northwestern. I don't know which CJ Stroud we're going to get, and I could understand. There's pause for concern there, as there are with really all the quarterbacks, all the top quarterbacks in this draft. I thought all along it's part of the problem. A large part of the problem has to do with the Ohio State coaching staff, because if you've watched CJ Stroud, I don't think they let him loose enough. I don't think they let him run the offense by himself enough. He was always looking over the sidelines when he was behind the center, waiting for instruction as the play clock would wind down. Maybe that's because they had to put the handcuffs on him. I don't know. As far as where he goes, I don't think he'll get past. If he gets past the Texans, and if he gets past the Colts, I don't think he's going to get past the Raiders at 7.
What are the opinions of the people you speak to, Tony, when the Seahawks come up? What are the little nuggets you're hearing with regards to the Seahawks and in particular that number 5 pick?
Yeah, the Seahawks, as far as I'm concerned, are always a tough team to kind of predict what they're going to do. You hear one thing, and it turns out to be another thing. You hear they're going to turn left, and they turn right. I had posted earlier this week that the thought process in the league from people I spoke with is that they are going to take Jalen Carter at 5. But then I spoke with somebody close to the organization. They said they're not sure about Jalen Carter because they're not sure about handing him the $30 million in guaranteed money that the 5th pick is going to require. I've heard that they're looking to trade down, but you always hear that the Seahawks are looking to trade down. I think it would be a benefit to the Seahawks if Stroud is not taken by Houston, and that pushes the quarterbacks down and no one trades up for Paris Johnson. They may be able to move that 5th pick if they really want to for a quarterback for a team that wants to select Paris Johnson. Obviously, the Seahawks did a great job last year filling both tackle spots. So their ability to move down from 5, I think, depends on what happens in front of them. And if the quarterbacks start to slide, and if Paris Johnson starts to slide, I think there will be that opportunity for them to trade down to 5 and, potentially trade down at pick number 20, which I'm told that they would like to do.
I think Seahawks fans have talked about Jalen Carter, Tony, more than any other player over the last few months. And I wanted to sort of put you in the position of a decision maker. How would you balance up the obvious talent when you watch him playing for Georgia versus quite serious character concerns and a variety of concerns, aren't there? It's not just obviously the legal issue. It's a conditioning issue. It's a practice habit issue, and there's a lot of things there. So how would if you were GM of a team picking in the top 5, for example, and you had a chance to draft Jalen Carter, how do you think you would lean?
Well, that's why the draft isn't an exact science. I mean, what I would do is I would basically grill the Georgia coaches as best I can, find out about, Jalen Carter. Time and time again, we hear about these prospects, especially the very talented prospects who get by on natural talent. Odell Beckham Jr. was a perfect example. I mean, a guy who showed up at practice when he wanted to because the natural ability just made it so easy for him. What I would do is, you got to get into the head of Jalen Carter, and you got to kind of really grill the head coach and the defensive coordinator and the D-line coach and the conditioning coach at the University of Georgia. And then you got to make your decision from there and hope it's the best decision. I think what happens oftentimes is at this stage in the game, they start to look for holes. When I say they, I mean the media, people on the outside, start to look for holes in a player's game that sometimes aren't there because they got nothing else ready to write about. I mean, I can't say I ever saw Jalen Carter take plays off. I never saw that myself, and I've watched him a lot the past 3 years. I mean, the fact is he was a very talented guy who this year was the main focus on the inside of that defensive line. So when you're constantly doubled and triple teamed and you're wearing down over a 4-quarter period, it can at times look like you're taking plays off. So you have to be very careful with that. He's a very talented guy who fell into a bad situation with that racing incident when the 2 people tragically died. I think the disconcerting thing is, the reports were that he was constantly changing his story with the police rather than just telling the truth. That questions his trustworthiness. And then there was the poor conditioning that he was in during pro day. You may want to be able to understand it to an extent because he's dealing with legal issues. And then he just shoots himself in the foot with the agent announcing that he's not going to visit any team outside the top 10, which is just stupid. So he's made a lot of bad decisions, which I think has exposed him to a lot of criticism. But the bottom line is he's a very good player, and literally outside the top two, he's value. You're just going to have to roll the dice with him and see what happens.
The centre position is intriguing,
Yeah.
and it feels like the Seahawks will definitely make a move there at some point. It's just a question of who and where. What other chances do you think of a John Michael Schmitz or Joe Tippmann landing in Seattle, as you reported could be a possibility not so long ago?
Yeah, they would like either of those two. I don't think that they're very high on Luke Whippler as other teams are. I mean, if either of those guys, if they haven't taken a center at 20, or they haven't moved down to take a center, and one of those centers is available to them at the top of round 3, at the top of round 2, I think they would jump on both of those guys. But I don't think either John Michael Schmitz or Joe Tippmann are going to be available when they are called to the clock around 2. And I think it's more a situation where they're going to have to decide if they can't move down from 20, do they like Joe Tippmann at that spot, or can they trade down, 28 or whatever, and then take Joe Tippmann? I think they're going to have to take one of those guys if they really want them before they're called to the clock at the top of round 2. If I'm wrong and one of those players are at the available to them when they're called to the top of round 2, I'm sure you're going to see dancing in the Seattle Seahawks war room.
There was one other thing I wanted to ask you about that you reported after the league meetings, and The Athletic reported something very similar, was that there was a whisper doing the rounds amongst league sources that the Seahawks could potentially be interested in Anthony Richardson and may even have been thinking of moving up for Anthony Richardson. Is that not likely now, or do you think that perhaps maybe not moving up, but if Richardson was there, is there enough upside that someone like Pete Carroll, who has always been interested in freaky athleticism, and John Schneider, who's quite a traits-driven person as well, could that be an option for them, do you think?
I think it's a perfect fit. And one thing you left out of that equation is you got Geno Smith signed for, a couple of years, but it's really a 1-year deal. And in my opinion, being from New York, where Geno Smith was initially drafted, I think Geno Smith would be a great mentor for Anthony Richardson. I mean, I've watched Geno Smith grow as a person as much as a quarterback, and I know some of the things that he struggled with early on to become the person, the man that he is. And I think he'd be a great mentor for Anthony Richardson. In one of my first mocks, I had them, the Seahawks, taking Anthony Richardson with that second first-round pick, and this is before all the combine hype and the fact that he could jump through the roof and run as fast as any sprinter in the Olympics. But the fact he's got a small body of work, I think it would be a perfect fit. I haven't heard anything additional on it since I initially reported that, but it makes sense. You mentioned they like those long, freaky athletes. They like the upside. They like the traits. And both of them are very secure in their jobs, Pete Carroll and John Schneider. I mean, Russell Wilson couldn't get them fired. And that's the one thing about Anthony Richardson. If you select him, you better be very secure in your job, because if he busts, the blame is going to be put on you, and you're going to be thrown, you being the general manager, the coach, whoever made the decision, and you're going to be thrown out the front door.
There's a handful of players I just wanted to ask you very quickly for your personal opinion of. There has been a bit of talk recently of the Seahawks moving back to a 4-3. So Myles Murphy, what kind of range do you think he will ultimately go in, Tony? Because he's a player that some people rate very highly. Others have maybe soured on him a little bit as this process has gone along. But he had a great pro day.
And he's had a good season. He's had a terrific season at Clemson. The past 2 years, he's always been. I've always had him highly rated. I'm looking at my board right now. He's the 6th rated player on my board. The only 2 edge rushers, pass rushers ahead of him are Will Anderson and Tyree Wilson. And Tyree Wilson's got some medical issues. I think when you look at Murphy, he's very athletic. He's a great pass rusher. You can stand him you can stand him up over tackle, or you can have him come out of a 3-point stance. He's got to get a little bit bigger. He's got to get a little bit stronger. and he can't be a liability against the run on Sunday, which may be an issue early in his career until he fills out that frame of his, which is 6'4.5". I like his upside. I like his pass rush skills. I like his athleticism, to get up the field, change direction, and get out into space and make plays in space. I've always had a high opinion of Myles Murphy. I've never soured on him.
Running back I wanted to ask you about was Kendre Miller. He's a player that I went back to have a look at this week. I think the Seahawks are probably going to take somebody in the middle rounds to partner with Ken Walker. So what is your personal view on Kendre Miller?
A lot of people like. My own personal opinion is he's a tough but shifty runner with excellent vision, can run through tackles, can run around defenders, really best on the inside, not a true perimeter runner, solid pass catcher out of the backfield. I think it's a shame that he got hurt in that game against Michigan because we didn't really get to see him finish that game or play against Georgia where he really could have displayed his skills. I think he's going to end up in the third round. I think he could be a feature runner, or you could use him in a rotational system.
Another player, and I'm going to butcher his name here, so I've got a couple of other names we can call him by, Tony. Adetomiwa Adebawore. I believe we've both
win the prize.
I believe we've both spoken to him. I've interviewed him. You've had a chance to sit down with him, haven't you, as well? Jim Nagy said that they were calling him Addy Addy at the Senior Bowl. So we called him that, and then I think he likes Tommy. So there's a few options here.
Tommy.
But as a player and as a person, what were your takeaways?
Nothing but great things to say about him. I mean, as a player at Northwestern, he didn't progress from his junior year to his senior year as I had hoped, because when I look at players, I try and watch them throughout their career, and I expect degrees of progression throughout their career. I really didn't see it from him, but then the fact is, they kind of misused him there, and he's the only one on that player. We talked about, Jalen Carter had good talent around him. Adebawore was basically the only guy in that Northwestern defensive front seven. He goes to the Senior Bowl, and he basically dominates 3 days of practice against very good offensive linemen. And he did so at defensive end. He also did so at defensive tackle. If he's a terrific one-gap defensive tackle prospect, I like him more than Kalijah Kancey, who a lot of people have highly rated. I did get to speak with him for about 30 minutes at the Combine. Very impressive. We actually talked about track and field as much as we talked about football. And, you say, well, he's 6'1.5", 283 pounds. He is every much 283 pounds. I mean, he looks like a big guy in his shoulders, a big bruising 283-pound guy. He's intelligent. He's articulate. A lot to like there. I don't know why he's not getting more love than he is. I mentioned Kalijah Kancey. You compare him to Kalijah Kancey, he's slightly taller. He's slightly bigger. He ran the 40 almost 2/10 faster. I mean, his testing numbers were significantly better than Kalijah Kancey. Yes, he doesn't have the production of Kalijah Kancey, but Kancey had a good defensive line. He had good players around him, where Adebawore was basically the only guy on that line. I'm very impressed with him. I think if he gets out of the first round, it looks like he's not going to be selected in the first round. That early pick in round 2 for the Seahawks, if they're looking for a defensive lineman, I think that would be a good fit.
And no surprise that you were speaking to him about track and field, because you were a star of track and field, were you not, Tony?
Well, I don't know. Star is a bit much, but yeah, I actually trained for the Olympic decathlon for 10 years. So, in fact, I just came back from a 5-mile run not too long ago. So if I don't look my usual fetching self, you know why. But yeah, no, we had to actually. He was a state champion in the shot put and discus at Adebawore. So we had a long conversation about that, techniques and throwing. It was good. And
what was your best event? What was your best event?
Well, the decathlon was weird because when I competed in it, my highest scoring event was the high jump, the way the scoring tables went. But I used to kick everybody's butt in the shot put. I used to throw a shot put 50 feet. And I used to love, unlike most people, I used to enjoy the 1500, even though it was a lot of pain, a lot of agony. I was a pretty good 1500 meter man, but back then the tables were a little bit different. The scoring tables were a little bit different than they are today. I probably would have scored much higher in 2023 than I did when I competed back when, because of the scoring tables were, and my better events were the events that didn't give away a lot of points.
I always like to throw a question your way that's sort of general draft or a combine type question here, Tony. And the one I've got for you this year is, it feels like fewer and fewer players are doing a complete set of testing results.
Yeah.
It's getting less and less every single year. I kind of wonder if next year, even worse, if a trend is ongoing here. Is there anything that you think the teams or the leagues could do to address this? And how much of an issue is it that teams don't have? I mean, maybe it's more of a media thing, because I just want to see all of the information. Maybe the teams have information that the media doesn't have, Tony. But how big a deal is this, do you think?
Well, first of all, it's a couple different things. And I think a lot of it has to do with the commercialization of the combine and the fact that, combine workouts used to start at 8 o'clock in the morning. 8 o'clock in the morning, and then the guys, the position group was done usually about 2 hours later. Now they're starting at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And when I was there Sunday, I mean, the tight ends didn't finish till like 8:30 at night. One year when they had the position group start at 8 o'clock, I mean, it was 12:45, a quarter to midnight, and they were still doing work on the field. So I think that has a lot to do with it, a ton to do with it. These guys sit around all day, and then they got to perform, they got to test. There's also the fact that, right or wrong, they have these guys weigh in before before they work out, because they want to try and get a more of a truer measurement. Because what used to happen is these guys used to fill themselves, the smaller guys used to fill up on water weight, get on the scale, so they were a few pounds heavier than they were when they would actually work out. And then they would just urinate away all that water weight, and they'd work out at a lighter weight than what they were when they stepped on the scale. So I think that has had a lot to do with it. And then that leads to guys not completing the full workout. DeJuan Jones, the offensive lineman from Ohio State, I mean, really didn't do anything else but and I can look it up, did the 40, never did the shuttles, never did the 3-cone. You do the 40 at the combine, and then when you go to the 3-cone or the shuttles, well, I did my position drills, so I'm a little bit tired. Then you go to pro day, oh, I hurt my left hamstring, I can't do it. I think the commercialization of the combine, to bring it to television, NFL Network, one year was on, I think, ABC or ESPN, all the drills. I think that has had as much to do with it, the fact that players are not doing the full workout, than anything else. And I know that the teams really dislike it, because, like I said, back in the day, first workouts would be at 8 o'clock, second workouts maybe 10:30, 11 o'clock, and you'd be done. Now it's wait all day before the players start to work out.
It's a real shame about DeJuan Jones, isn't it? Because I remember that first day at the Senior Bowl, and you just think, wow, what a performance. And then, he never capitalized on that, did he? He never built off that. It was just like, that was it. We saw him do that, and we saw him do the drills on the field at the combine, and we've heard nothing of him since then.
It's been sort of a miniature version of Jalen Carter, in that, since that one great day, the first day of practice at the Senior Bowl, he's almost done everything wrong. I mean, he packed it in the last 2 days. And I was told, although I really want to report, I was told that he was not going to practice the rest of the week. He was going to basically just rely on that first great day. Goes to the combine, runs the 40. I was at Ohio State Pro Day, and all he did was stand around in gray sweats, and he did nothing. Didn't even do position drills. Would not get on the scale. If you look at the APT report, would not sign the consent form. Stood around, do drills. Meanwhile, Paris Johnson is out on the field doing drills, looking phenomenal, looking absolutely phenomenal. And I wrote about how everyone was going to talk about CJ Stroud's workout, and that's what was going to garner the headlines. But Paris Johnson on the pro day looked awesome. And you're right. I mean, DeJuan Jones, after the Senior Bowl, people are thinking late first round. Then he goes to the combine. He was okay. Pro day, he cheeses a lot. The pro days and the combine, everything else, for lack of a better word, these are major job interviews, and your employer is about to sign you to a contract that could be millions and millions of dollars. So when you're not performing well in a job interview, it's going to hurt you. And I think it's going to hurt DeJuan Jones, who went from a potential late first round pick. Now I think at best, he's a late second round choice.
I always like to end with a question about the Jets. A new quarterback is on the way, it seems. But where is the franchise at the moment? And is there a lot of anticipation for Aaron Rodgers' inevitable arrival?
There's always a lot of anticipation for the Jets from Jet fans. I mean, after last year's draft, I was reading things on the internet about how the Jets had enough talent to go to the Super Bowl, which I thought was laughable. You never know with the Jets. I mean, you don't. I mean, I'm a season ticket holder. I haven't missed a home game in like 43 seasons. I can't say I'm a fan anymore because I just go keep my streak going. I'm a bit disgusted with things that happen. But, yeah, we great. Jets get Aaron Rodgers. The Jets still need 3 to 4 starting offensive linemen. I mean, they are in desperate need of a center, which they hope to get likely in the second round of the draft. Who's going to play left tackle? What are you getting from Mekhi Becton? I mean, really, the only solid, productive blocker offensive lineman they have coming back is Elijah Vera Tucker, who was hurt last year. So, yeah, you're getting Aaron Rodgers, but who's going to protect Aaron Rodgers? So, it's just, we'll see what happens with the trade. I think the trade will happen. I don't know if it's going to happen before the draft, on draft day, or after the draft. If it doesn't happen by the time the second round of the draft is over and the Jets have made those 2 picks, what's going to happen is Green Bay is going to demand the Jets turn over their first round pick or the first pick of the 2024 draft. There's always high anticipation. And the minute that the trade becomes official, there are going to be a lot of Jet fans who lose their minds with excitement. But from my experience and being one of those players, one of those fans who used to lose their minds, I'm going to take a wait and see approach.
Well, Tony, it's been a pleasure speaking to you as it always is. I always look forward to this every single year. And again, a plug for the brilliant podcast. I think it's fantastic that the Giants do a general draft show. So it's not just a giant show, is it? If people are wondering, if they go over to the New York Giants YouTube channel, there is a podcast which involves Tony and giving his opinions. It's been a must listen for me throughout this process again. And have you got further shows planned before the draft?
We got 2 shows, busy week. I'm doing 2 shows with John Schmelk at NewYorkGiants.com, 2 different podcasts. We have a live show Wednesday night with Trey Wingo and Adam Kaplan at Pro Football Network, where we're going to go preview the draft and go through all the news and rumors I'm hearing. And then, like we did last year, we're going to live stream the first round of the draft. Last year, we did day 1 and 2. I think this year we're only doing day 1 at Pro Football Network. And if you want to know the picks before they're announced on TV, check us out, because that's what we did last year. We get the picks as they come in before they're announced. So if you're a Seahawks fan and you can't bear to wait to see the announcement about Roger Goodell walking up with the card, give us a listen, because we'll have the information.
Tony, thank you for your time as always. And check out Tony Pauline on Pro Football Network, on that Giants YouTube channel as well. You get your podcast through the Giants for draft season. It's all brilliant. Number 1 draft insider, I think, up there with Mel Kiper for me is really what the draft means, the essence of the draft. And a pleasure to speak to you again, Tony.
Thanks for having me, Rob. I look forward to this every year.